When I was first starting out teaching, I worked for an absolutely amazing and excellent and highly professional school district in Arizona. And one of the things that we needed to do at the very beginning of the school year was to look through this catalog that was provided to all teachers and select the professional development courses or experiences that we were going to sign up for that would happen sometime throughout the year. And we were expected to do, I don't remember, one or two, but there were many that sounded very interesting to me. And as a newer teacher, I always look forward to participating in those experiences because they addressed things that I knew as a teacher I needed some work on. So that was a great experience. And in those days, everything that we did with professional development was all done face-to-face. It was either facilitated at our own school, or our school district had a very large centralized kind of classroom area for teachers, and that we would meet after school. And occasionally it would be something that we would get a substitute teacher paid for, and we would go like for the day, and it might be a teaching and learning experience in a classroom type setting, or it might be participating in some kind of a local conference or local teacher experience. But it was really beneficial to me, and I really appreciated it. Now, I know that we live in a different world as far as support for teaching goes, and the idea of receiving an entire catalog of opportunities at the beginning of the school year is probably sounds pretty foreign to many teachers. But the reality is, with technology the way it is now, there are actually many more opportunities available for any teacher to be able to participate in meaningful professional learning experiences. And that's what this final part of the class focuses on. So the overall purpose of this class is to encourage you to learn how technology might be used to improve teaching or improve the practice of professional educators. Now, important in that purpose is the word technology. And it's very important for you to understand at this point in the class, if you don't already, that technology has two very distinct definitions. One of them is what people generally think of when they hear the word technology, and that's like computers or any other physical tool, usually something that needs to be plugged in or needs to be charged, that can be useful in a teacher's practice. So that's technology in terms of actual, instruments or things. But the other use of the word technology is very important, and I'm going to read you this definition because it's defined differently depending on what source you get. But this is a very important definition that I really like, and it is the use of scientific knowledge for practical purposes, such as creating tools, processes, and systems to solve problems or make tasks easier. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because that genuinely is the technology that I have been trying to promote in this class. So when you look at the experiences that you've had, I was asking you to, yes, use computers, use artificial intelligence and other creative types of tools, hardware and software tools, but I was asking you to do it to learn more about the other technology, the technology of good and effective instructional design. And instructional design, at least the model that I was promoting and the components of it that I was promoting in this class, are definitely systems, processes, and procedures designed to help you solve problems. And the problems are almost always, or at least should be, related to what is it that you want students to learn how to do, and what can you do most effectively to ensure that they will learn how to do those things. So I asked you to examine, first of all, what's worth learning in the first place? That is a question teachers need to ask themselves pretty much every day on their job. And I asked you to do that in a broad way. But then I looked at some specific components of good design. One had to do with how do you define a context that provides meaning and purpose for students to learn what you want them to learn. So I provided a model and a systematic way to consider how might you design learning contexts and what role might hardware and software tools play in that process. But then we looked at other components of good design, like how to create an effective and compelling introduction, how to present activities that are contextualized and problem-based, but that can communicate information in an effective way. So you completed one project in which you had to apply theory of good message design to how you might communicate information to students. We had looking at the effectiveness of practice and feedback, and how you might use tools like AI to help you with that, and how you might effectively help students review the learning process. So those were, if you want, they were kind of the hidden curriculum of you learning more about the more important technology, the technology of designing effective learning experiences, and regardless kind of what hardware or software you have at your disposal. So that's what this class was about. So if you look at the course big picture, you see that I asked you to define your learners and to communicate who you are so that I could build a community or at least a social presence. I asked you to look at what strategies you might use to help build community in your own educational setting. We spent a good part of this class looking at how you would use technologies to support specific components of good instruction. And again, that's all part of the big picture. We spent a little bit of time looking at how technology might be useful to help you manage the processes and resources for learning. And then the last part of the class is looking at how technology might be useful for you as you move forward in your practice, whatever it is, and whoever your learners will be. How might you use hardware and software resources that could help you, that could provide opportunities for you to continually improve your practice. So that's what this class was all about. That's what you developing was all about. And I will say right now that some people get a little frustrated with this class because they say, oh, I never learned about this tool. I never learned about that tool. I never learned how to use Google Classroom effectively. And that's because that was not the point of this class. This class had much bigger aspirations than just you learning how to use a specific tool. Now, in the process, I know some of you did learn something like creating Google sites. You learned a lot more about that than you knew before the class started. But that's because that was part of the context of creating an environment for you to be able to communicate your work to me. And if you think about it, nearly every single thing that you were asked to do in this class, every project involves some element of creating something that looked like something that might be useful for you in your practice. And yes, many of the ideas were contrived because, this is a controlled learning environment. But fundamentally, I used creativity as a tool for you to learn some of those important things. And hopefully that was a context that you found provided some meaning and purpose, at least to try to get things done. So that's how we ended up here. So that's it for the rest of the class. This has been quite a journey. I know that some of you might think that I embedded AI in everything, and that there was more to technology and education than AI, but I did that because I think everybody in the professional world of education are grappling with ways that AI might impact their profession in some way. And so it's as important now as 25 years ago learning about this thing called the World Wide Web was important. As important as 10 or 12 years ago, the introduction of smartphones, or at least the ubiquitous presence of smartphones, both in the real world and in some cases for teachers, like we had to deal with that, you know. So we have to address AI, and for me personally, I think it is a tool that can really help teachers genuinely improve learning experiences for students if it serves those instructional design components that were the focus of this class.